That represents 41%. There's 9 states that have legalized recreational marijuana use, and that represents 21%. You got 21 states that prohibited no access, which is only 37. That means that 62.9%, or 204 million of the U.S. population has access to one form of marijuana as either medical or recreational. So again, it's more than 50%. It's more common. And it becomes almost like there's no effect in the shot. So here is the key, and why is there a growth in marijuana? As Patrick has indicated, just follow the money. I think these next few slides will highlight why, what's happened in most recent years regarding the commercialization of marijuana. Here are some quotes. The financial impact of marijuana. Cannabis globally is disrupting the pharmaceutical industry, the alcohol industry, the consumer packaged goods industry, and to some extent tobacco industry. This is a quote from the CEO, Brendan Kennedy, with Tilray Pharmaceuticals. So who is Tilray Pharmaceuticals? Tilray Pharmaceuticals is a corporation located in Canada. And in Canada, in October 17, 2018, it legalized marijuana for the whole country. So these major corporations are Canadian location. There are 3 major ones. There's Canopy Growth Corporation, which is market cap, which is on the board in the stock exchange, is valued at $16.8 billion. Tilray is valued at $7.5 billion. Cronus Group, which is another one, is valued at $3.5 billion. But one other thing I want to share with you. Within these groups is a player, and this player is Altria Corporation. Who is Altria? Altria is the maker of Marlboro cigarettes, which made 2 big investments in 2018. They spent $1.8 billion for a 45% stake in Canadian cannabis company Cronus. And they also spent another $12.8 billion for a 35% stake in e-cigarette giant Juul. So, ladies and gentlemen, the tobacco industry isn't closed shop and gone away. They sold their stake in tobacco and now shifted to the 2 areas that are most important to them to continue their profits, which is cannabis and e-cigarettes. And e-cigarette is important because it can be converted and used illicitly with marijuana. So again, that's a direct result of where is the money and why and where is the medical equity of this? It's not there. Here's a stock photograph. This is Tilray Incorporated. Imagine all of those buds. This is marijuana at the scale that's unseen. It's almost like you're looking at a cornfield. Here's a cartoon that was posted in the Denver Post in 09, and the caption is, when is it officially time for concern? And the other person says, when medical marijuana dispensary squeezes out Starbucks outlets. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's exactly what's happening. So here is from the Washington State. You have Starbucks and McDonald's, and they're marijuana businesses that have more than Starbucks and McDonald's. But in Colorado, we actually have marijuana businesses that are greater than the combined McDonald's and Starbucks industry. So what you're seeing is a proliferation of businesses because they recognize there is a business to be made. There is profits to be made. Here's a quote. This is Coca-Cola. This is one of our venerable brands in the United States. And here's the quote. Along with many others in the beverage industry, we are closely watching the growth of non-psychoactive CBD, cannabidiol, as an ingredient in functional wellness beverages around the world. The space is evolving quickly. So what you're going to see is instead of a monster beverage with just caffeine, you're going to see a monster beverage with CBD and maybe some THC. Here is an example of in Washington State, a gram of marijuana, and again, it's supply and demand. You're looking at the value of price of marijuana per gram, and it was in, I think in 14, it was $29. As more dispensaries, as more availability of marijuana is to the public, what happens is drives that price. Now it's down to $9 a gram. It just grows up to 10. So again, this is an example of how the money and the profit are driving the price of commodity. All right, so now I'm going to go through some myths. So here's the first myth. Marijuana plant is natural and safe. It's made from God. It's a holistic drug. How can you refuse this plant? Well, we know that marijuana is preferred by smoking. So here's from a study, it's CSAR 2015. The number one way of consuming marijuana is by joint. You have a bong, or bowl or pipe, blunts, with the exception of edible and drink or any vaporizing. A majority of how you consume marijuana is by smoking. Well, let's see what's in that smoke. So here are the conditions on how marijuana is smoked. It tends to be inhaled unfiltered. It's more deeply held, like where a smoker takes in it. It's in their lungs longer and can be damaging to lungs and respiratory system. And that's how typically it's smoked. So, in California, the California Environmental Protection Agency conducted a study. And in 2009, they looked at the carcinogenicity of marijuana smoke. And what they discovered is when you did a side-by-side comparison, you're looking at all of these, carcinogenic properties. So here's the constituent. This is what they capture: marijuana smoke, and here's tobacco smoke. And look where you have your arsenic, you have benzene, you have cadmium, you have chromium, you have lead, you have mercury, you have nickel. That's just the heavy metals, not to mention all these other properties. What's interesting is also, this is the California Environmental Protection Agency. But one thing that's interesting about this study is that recently there was a landmark, there was a judge who put out, and I'll read this because it's very interesting. All right, so in California, the cancer warning policy in 1986 state law called Proposition 65. They enacted a drinking water supply from toxic and potentially cancer-causing chemicals. It also mandates that the state keep a master list of all chemicals known to be toxins and requires manufacturers and businesses to warn people about these chemicals if they're present in products or buildings, even extremely small doses. Well, in California, there was a judge who stated that acrylamide, which is a natural process in coffee, rules that the cancer warning label must be on a coffee cup. So the question I ask is, why isn't there a warning on marijuana in the dispensaries? Where is that warning that says benzene could be possibly there, or lead, or cadmium? So in reality, what I'm trying to say is this particular drug is getting the free ride. There's never been any restriction. There's always been an exemption as to why they can get the free ride that every other product has to meet FDA or consumer protection requirement. So again, here is the myth. The myth is that it's not a safe drug. It's not a safe plant because it has these residual constituent toxins. So one of the things that two states, well, Colorado and Maryland, they performed through independent testing laboratories pesticide analysis, microbial impurities, they do residual solvent testing, heavy metal screen, foreign matter inspection, and mold and yields. So again, ladies and gentlemen, when an individual, it's the black market, as Mr. Kelly has shown, when you have these products that are out in the street, they're not free of the contaminants. They're going to have even more so because the profiteers want to maximize their product, and they disregard what is safe to the public and consumption. Second myth, marijuana has no lasting effects on the brain. Again, you've heard very much so. I can get stoned and I can come back, nice and recover. So here are some data and some information I want to show you. This is Sir Robin Murray. He's a professor of psychiatric research, Institute of Psychiatry at King's College, UK, on the relationship between cannabis use and psychosis. And what he has found through his studies is that there's a link between psychosis and cannabis use. As a matter of fact, the risk increases 2 to 3 times for cannabis users. And the effects are strongest with heavy cannabis smokers. So those who are 4 to 5 potency joints a day, and which you might say that that's excessive, but in reality, there are individuals who will smoke one after another. I said we did a human performance study. One of the volunteers who we were paying for, that individual would smoke on average 5 to 7 cigarettes a day and use up more than 70% of their total earning power that they would get. Any money they would have would always go towards purchasing and acquiring marijuana. So there is this developing sort of addiction to it. So again, stopping cannabis is beneficial for recovery, but new types of cannabis, such as skunk or synthetic, are more dangerous as they contain higher THC. Here is a study that was conducted. It looks at, it's in Sweden. There's an N of 45,000, so it's a significant number of individuals. You're looking at number of times the cannabis taken, and as it relates to cases of schizophrenia per 1,000. So the more you consume marijuana, the greater your chances are that you're going to get schizophrenia. So again, and this is not new, ladies and gentlemen. This has been, and this is from 1987. This was a 1987 Lancet. There was a study that was published where there was a correlation with schizophrenia and excess marijuana consumption. If you look at another study, you're looking at, again, you're looking at IQ drops. So what you're seeing in this study, for non-users, the average IQ is up here, but as you use more, your IQ statistically shows to considerably drop. So again, it goes to the heart of individuals who are marijuana users having a disadvantage in socioeconomic growth. And so if you are smoking marijuana, the potential downfall is that you're going to not be as successful as perhaps those individuals who are abstaining. So again, I can't emphasize more the fact that this is the cause and effect. Here's another myth. Marijuana is not addictive. Again, you hear this all the time. I can stop at any time, but that's not really correct. So what is cannabis use disorder? This is found in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 4. Cannabis use disorder is a legitimate DSM-4. It looks at some of the characteristics are, cannabis is used in large amounts over a long period of time and intended. That represents that 5.3 million were their daily users. I would say that's large amounts and over a long period of time, repeated failures to discontinue or reduce the amount of cannabis. An inordinate amount of time is occupied acquiring or recovering from the effects of marijuana. You get cravings, continued use of cannabis despite adverse consequences, such as criminal charges or spouse and partner friendship. And these are all classic cannabis use disorder, and all of them are related to individuals who are consumed with taking it and who are focused more on the marijuana than they are in their own existence around them. So, looking at this other study, we're looking at neurocognitive performances. When you're looking at heavy use of marijuana, it's associated with a reduction in neurocognitive performance. This is the study that summarizes this particular condition. In this study, it demonstrated that THC dose contained in cannabis cigarette was linearly related to cognitive and psychomotor performance. Response time slowed down, motor control became worse with increased THC doses. So again, it's cause and effect. The more you take, the higher the potency, the greater chance you're going to have this particular neurocognitive performance deficiency. So it's very linear and it's very destructive. Long-term use, again, we have cognitive dysfunction. It's associated with long-term heavy use. It respects to the cognitive endophenotypes and have been proposed as the vulnerable markers of schizophrenia. So long-term use equals schizophrenia. Now, there is a reversal, but again, you have to do it. You have to reverse. You can't just continue on using it and not expect it to materially return to its norm. Here's another myth. I need marijuana for pain management. So the fact is that the majority of dispensaries in the states that have legalized medical marijuana, one of the qualifying conditions is chronic pain. So where is the evidence to suggest that if you take marijuana and you had post-surgery, and that surgery, you had like a knee surgery or something like that, that you should not take your hydrocodone, you should take your cannabis. Those are anecdotal stories. There are some stories that say, yeah, I take marijuana, it relieves this pain, or I have migraines or something like that. But there is no clinical trials, and what I'm sharing is, here is a typical 2016 is the marijuana dispensary patrons. This was done, it's not an official survey, but sort of it's from a study that I pulled out. But the key here is the majority of those individuals who have medical dispensary certificates to go in and purchase their medical marijuana is soft tissue diagnosis. It's very hard to have a diagnosis. Like you might have like glaucoma, you might have some other underlying factors that you could definitely diagnose and show from some blood data. But this is a soft tissue diagnosis. Typically, they were white male. That's the demographics. Traffic is usually on Fridays and Sundays, and less than 5% of the patrons have HIV/AIDS or glaucoma. So the medical marijuana industry will paint this picture, the reality of this picture. So that's marketing, that's messaging. Here's another data. This is from our own state of Maryland, and we have a medical marijuana program here in the state that's legalized. when you do a breakdown on diagnosis for cannabis use, you see that chronic pain is 32%, and then more than one diagnosis is 43%. But the evidence is not there to suggest that there's a relief with marijuana of chronic pain. And here's these are two states, Colorado and Oregon. Severe pain, 92% and 90% are the stated reasons for going to medical marijuana dispensaries and getting their medical marijuana. So again, the majority is, again, that soft tissue, severe pain, chronic pain, which is very hard to diagnose. Here's a study to make that point. You know, what is the effect of cannabis use in people with chronic cancer pain prescribed opioids? And the finding was over a 4-year prospective cohort study. And here are, again, the summary from that study. Cannabis use was common in people with chronic non-cancer pain who had been prescribed opiates. They found no evidence that cannabis was used to improve patient outcomes. And in fact, people who use cannabis had greater pain and lower self-efficacy in managing pain. And lastly, no evidence that cannabis use reduced pain severity or interference or extent or exerted an opioid-sparing effect. So this is Lancet. This is not High Times. This is a medical peer-reviewed article, and these are also they're clinical studies. And as Patrick has said, everybody's saying, well, there's lack of research in marijuana. It's not true. There are studies now. The obstacles that used to prevent research from happening, which is because it was a Schedule I, is now being reduced. And so we are seeing, and in SAMHSA as well as in HHS, we are encouraging it through cooperation and partnership with DEA. We're getting those agreement and approvals for research. There was a quote that I forgot. I meant to say it. The gist of the quote is, science is ruined by facts. So when you want to go in for research, and you have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is you're going to focus on this, and then all of a sudden all the data and everything shows that it's not. Then all of a sudden, what do you do with that thing? You don't want to publish it because you definitely are undermining your own thesis, but that's where science is important. It should be unbiased, it should be unfiltered, it should be open. And that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for we're hoping for studies that would, one way or the other, produce the data and the information for the public. And the last thing I want to say is, this last myth is really something that we see more and more every day. It says no one has died from consuming marijuana. That's a true statement. There's only been one documented pathological death associated with the intoxication of marijuana solely. But that's not to say that marijuana is not a contributing factor to death. Yeah. And I want to share with you, this is a wonderful reference, and I would encourage everybody to. It's online. It's for the public, and it's the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, the impact. And they do like every 2-year impact study, and this is volume 5, and it's October 2017. And I pulled this stuff right from this data, and these are the Colorado headlines. And read what they are. It's very intriguing because it says, young professional commits suicide at 23. Parents question if THC is to blame. And there's their quote. It's just marijuana. It's not going to hurt anything. But yet that individual commits suicide as a result of some psychotic behavior or some psychosis that was as a result of taking marijuana. Another parent, it says there's another headline that really was very disturbing. Parents were charged with child abuse for identical deaths of 2 babies rolled over. Indications of alcohol and marijuana use. This case happened was this parents had 2 children, and they had one child die from SIDS, has been defined as SIDS, and then they come to find out that the second death happened identically some months or a year later, and it was as a result of the parents consuming alcohol and marijuana and then rolling over. So you have this rollover situation. So that child is a direct result death of individuals consuming marijuana. And then lastly, man shoots wife and kills neighbor. And again, marijuana, caffeine, fuel paranoid states. And as Fabio said, marijuana today is not what was the marijuana of 10 years ago or the counterculture. If you're looking at marijuana with potency in oils of 80% or of the buds at 25, 30%, then you're going to have individuals who could potentially, or naive individuals, who all of a sudden are subject to that effect. Here's an example of vehicular deaths, and I just want to bring this table to everybody's attention. Again, here are vehicular deaths associated to marijuana positive in Colorado and 34 states without medical marijuana laws from 94 to 2011. What this graph shows is that here is the point where Colorado legalization happened. This represents the trend line for in the United States, or those 34 states without medical marijuana. And here is what's happened at this juncture. So you're seeing more vehicular deaths. You're going to see more vehicular accidents. You look at this another way. Here is the same, there's another data, but it comes from the same, from Colorado. Looking at crashes, you're looking at 2006 to 2016. And you look at the state fatalities statewide. So you're seeing all these different numbers, but there's a little increase. But look at now with fatality with drivers testing positive. This is the drivers, not the passengers. So the driver who tests positive for marijuana, you're seeing a steady increase. And if you look at it as a percentage of total fatalities, with the exception of, I believe, 2013, you're seeing nothing but increases. And last year, or in 2016, you saw 20% of the total state fatalities was attributed to a driver under the influence of marijuana. So ladies and gentlemen, marijuana does kill. It doesn't kill directly, but indirectly. And you as a passenger, you either a passenger or you as a driver on that road, and you have somebody, what I say is, driving is a privilege, right? And I have the same rights on the road to have individual driving not impaired. So again, this marijuana does kill. And that, I'll end. So at this point, I think we can have time for some questions. Yes? Just come to the
This was very informative, thank you. I work with teenagers in Indiana. We're right on the border of Indiana and Kentucky. I have been to some of these presentations in the past, and can you tell me whether or not the research done includes research on street level THC concentrations, or if there's a limit on the amount of THC that can be used in scientific research in the United States? Are we doing research on hash oil at 80%?
Yeah. So this is how, when the research has been done, it has to go what's known as an IRB, International Intermediate Review Board. The board had, your source of your marijuana typically comes from a facility that is part of the federal program. In this particular case, we have a location that's called RTI International. They produce marijuana, they grow it, and what happens is that the marijuana percentage is around 11%, which is way under what you would see on the black market or even in growers during for dispensaries.
Okay, that's what I heard.
Yes.